'Tis the season to find glimmers.
Join us as we break script to find the glimmers and the triggers in Hallmark movies and the way home.
So grab your preferred cup of cheer with fa la 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 and Nini. Welcome back to the Breaking Script podcast with Lala and Nini. I'm Lala.
And I'm Nini, and we are into the new year.
Yay.
Woohoo!
2024.
That's right. And I know we just had a replay for you guys. We hope you still enjoyed it, though, with a little bit of our realignment for the month of January. But do we want to talk about how it was a little bit of a different Christmas, Lala?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. throwing it right back in your court.
It was a little bit different. We both had sickness. So Lala was still in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here in Kansas City with my kids. And it's definitely, I think, something that kept coming to me. There's a phrase that just kept being repeated in my head was that I'm learning how to have joy and sorrow in the same cup.
That's good.
Like, I knew I was in a different place because I was able to find grief and glimmers. I feel like I need to make something to put good grief and glimmers. To be able to have grief and call it good.
Yeah.
And still find glimmers that bring you true joy at the same time for me is proof to me that there's capacity to ground.
So good.
But when you 4 out of 6 kids had fevers on Christmas Day.
That is
an
terrible.
interesting experience. And like, you guys, it's okay. Things need to change. But things need to change and can't go according to plan. And I'll let Lala tell hers, but
yes,
it can affect things and it can change, right?
I know it really can. Our family, we were all like everybody one by one was getting hit by sickness. And my aunt, whose house we usually do everything at, she wasn't able to host. So like the day before Christmas or like the 2 days before, I was asked to host Christmas Day morning with our whole family, which is 17 people. And my house is not very big. And so we were all of a sudden rushing around getting everything ready. And I think we just like went so hard. My husband got sick literally the day after Christmas. My mom was sick. My other aunt was so sick she couldn't even come to Christmas dinner. Like it not only was like locationally it felt off because we're so used to doing it in one place. There was no like nostalgia. And then to not have everyone at Christmas dinner was just a bummer. So not that we had a great Christmas, but it definitely felt different. And then I used to be a chronic migraine sufferer. And I haven't had one in like 5 years. And I've had 2 in the last like 2 months. So Nini was great. We were supposed to record yesterday and I got hit with one. So we're doing it today, but I think it's just the come down from the holiday.
Yeah,
I really think that's what it is.
Yeah. It was just such a good reminder for me. And we've both had so much going on. Like, we're not going to all get into it today because we want to get back to our regularly scheduled program because there's a lot to cover today. But I would say, can we accurately say, Lala, that since the end of October, there have been a series of events, like personal in our community, that has been like earthquakes and aftershocks. Like,
yes.
One right after another.
Oh, and can I just throw this out here before Christmas? My car got stolen out of my driveway.
Exactly.
The week before, literally the week of Christmas. So yes, earthquakes and aftershocks and just everything.
Yeah. We're sharing the tip of the iceberg here, guys. Tip
literally.
Of like not even anything. Like
exactly. If that gives you a glimpse into what we've been dealing with.
Exactly.
And the car being stolen was the easiest thing for us.
Craziest thing. That was my first Lala made a video, and I was like, wow, they're both smiling after their car got stolen, both my brother and Lala. I was
You could,
so not in a toxic positivity way by any means. Like they were just so surrendered and like just smiling
seriously, yeah.
and still going
You
with
know
the
what?
flow. It was just
There
so
was a lot
beautiful.
of peace. There was a lot of peace, but it is just been. I was telling my sister like this is not coincidence. Like I don't think that it's
Exactly.
coincidental. I think that there's something going on, and whether or not you believe in like, we'll throw out the term spiritual warfare here. I definitely think something is happening, and but I
Yeah.
do really feel the Lord's goodness despite tragedy. And that's
Yeah.
why I love what you said is like I'm even learning in my own life like yeah, good and bad can coexist, and it's okay to feel two things at the same time. I think we believe we can only feel one or the other. But the Lord
Yeah.
is good despite darkness, like um and you're right, slowing down and just having rest and peace is the only way to, move forward and really have joy
Yeah.
in the times you don't want to have joy.
Totally. I've learned from Jewish culture. I love that they greet each other with shalom.
Mm,
I love that they observe Shabbats on Friday nights. I find that when I do that, it makes my weekend feel longer and more grounded.
mm,
But I just want to share with you, like, I've been like meditating and just like soaking in the word shalom because
mm,
in the midst of like when you're in a season of holding joy and sorrow in the same cup and you're trying to do the work of good grief and glimmers at the same time, it
mm-hmm,
can feel really discombobulating. And it's shalom literally if you take, because in Hebrew their letters are their words are characters, and when you take the characters apart, it literally means, like, a lot of people think shalom just means peace.
mm-hmm.
It actually means the authority to destroy anything that tries to bind you to chaos.
Wow,
And I
that's
love
powerful.
that they greet one another in that way. Like when I'm saying shalom to you, that is what I'm sending you. Like, I just
Mm,
think that's so beautiful. So, anyways, I have literally been like, I just want to sit in it and not leave it in midst of all the things going on around us. For me, this was my first Christmas being divorced and being alone on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It was also the first Christmas that we didn't have a surgery for a kid
right.
in December. So it was like my body still had kind of PTSD, like we got to prep for surgery and
Mm,
Christmas, like at the
mm-hmm.
same time of like being prepared for recovery. It was like I had to tell my body, like, no, it's okay, Nini. We're not doing that this year.
Yeah.
It's just Christmas. And even though there was like sadness that I was by myself, and I have wonderful friends and support that like offered for me to be with them Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, they wouldn't leave me alone. But I actually had to come to the realization, like, yeah, it's okay to grieve that you're by yourself and that's different. But I actually
Mm-hmm.
needed the time. I took every minute to prepare. I was actually ahead in wrapping presents this year, but like it took everything in me
Mm-hmm.
to prepare, like mentally, physically. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think even you said, Lala, like even if we're not full blown sick, but there's sickness like all around us, our bodies could still be processing, and it can affect you emotionally. You're not
Yeah,
realizing, like, oh, I'm a little bit
so
down
true.
physically, actually. Like, do you ever wonder that sometimes? Like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, am I feeling bad emotionally, so it's affecting me physically, or am I feeling bad
Mm.
physically and it's
Sweet.
affecting me emotionally?
Wow, it's so true though.
Right? So, anyways,
Mm-hmm.
this is your reminder. I'm going to put a link in our show notes of the grief recovery workbook again. I forgot because I think I'd shared with in one of our previous podcast episodes, like, this is my journey in recovery, has had a lot of progress this last year in terms of like there was an acceleration in my progress of like breakthroughs, like the ones that you're waiting for years, like
Mm-hmm.
that it finally came and my capacity was increased, and I kind of forgot, like, I usually slow down in January,
Yeah.
but I forgot about it. So, anyways, this is my way of saying it's a perfect segue that the Soul Care 75 workbook is done. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to stop what you're doing and go back and listen to the podcast episode where we had our first guest, Heidi Mills. We reviewed on the 12th date of Christmas with Tyler Hines in it, of course. But we had mentioned that Heidi had a Soul Care 75 workbook that was in progress. And I know a lot of people do like New Year, New You and 75 Hard. If that's not where you are, that's okay. Join us for the Soul Care 75. There's a workbook, but there's also a Facebook support group that you can jump in on. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. I cannot tell you. It's perfect timing even for me. I did it last year, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I need to do this again. Soul Care 75. I cannot recommend it. It really helps me with those affirmations that I think I shared last year of like going along the lines of like the try softer technique, where when you're in a recovery or a reset or realignment part of your life where it's like slower is faster, it doesn't have to be a certain way. And it helps you to remind yourself as you're moving forward, I am human, I have choices, and I trust myself. When something's off and I need to like get curious and readjust, you have to be able to trust yourself instead of getting like, why can't I just get it together?
Yeah.
Or move faster. Actually, when you slow down to get curious, you move faster. So anyways, that is our welcome back. Happy New Year before we jump into The Way Home, episode 8.
It's the year 2000 and Kat refuses to let go of the past like she said she would. She's at the Landry farm and notices Colton and Dell aren't home. She creeps in and snoops around the house in search for answers. She hears a car pull up in the driveway and runs to hide. She listens as her parents argue intensely about Jacob's disappearance. The arguments end with Colton storming out of the house. In 2023, Alice is on the porch and spots her mother returning from the pond. She wonders why, since she said she was done with the pond, that Kat continues to go. Kat goes into the house only to see Byron and Dell. Byron is going to be staying with them on the couch while he recuperates from his accident. Outside, Kat chats with Elliot, who reprimands her for breaking and entering in her childhood home. She doesn't see it that way. She expresses her heartache for seeing her parents argue as she thought they were a united front during Jacob's tragedy. Elliot suggests grief can do awful things to relationships. Kat suspects her father was cheating. Rita, Jude, and Joyce stop by the Landry place and find Byron inside. They see it as Dell and Byron shacking up, but Dell says that she's just looking after him during his recovery. The group enjoys tea and plays poker together when Alice walks downstairs. Dell asks her to join. There's a knock at the door and Alice goes to open it. It's adult Nick. Kat returns home after spending time in the fields clearing her mind. She runs into Alice, who looks like she's seen a ghost. Alice tells her that Nick is inside to surprise his parents. He didn't recognize her. Kat wonders if Alice still loves him. It's obvious. She's in need of her best friend, Teen Kat. Her mother encourages her to go back to the year 2000 to see her. Alice takes off towards the pond. In the year 2000, Alice arrives at the Landrys and Teen Kat lets her in. They head upstairs to listen to Alanis Morissette. Things are obviously not well at home, and Teen Kat shares that she plans to leave Port Haven. Alice explains she wants to end things with Teen Nick. In 2023, Elliot, Kat, and adult Nick are out at the pub. Elliot and Kat grab a table while adult Nick makes his way towards the bar. Elliot and Kat discuss how adult Nick doesn't recognize Alice. Kat feels sympathy for her and declares that love sucks. She tells Elliot that things aren't going well for her either, as she found out about her father's potential affair. Nick overhears and wonders who she's talking about. Kat ignores him and they cheer to love being a sham. Meanwhile, in the Landry kitchen, Dell asks Byron about the head injuries he's mentioned during tea and poker. He says it's from his time on the front lines in Afghanistan. He was caught in an explosion where 3 people were killed, including his wife, Laura. Dell is shocked and wonders why he never said anything or wore a ring. Byron says that there's no point in staying married to a memory. In 2000, Teen Kat and Alice meet up with Teen Elliot and Teen Nick. Alice asks to speak to Teen Nick alone. When Alice breaks up with him, he's not surprised. She returns the fish hook bracelet he gave her. Teen Kat and Teen Elliot watch them, but Kat's pager buzzing interrupts them. It's Brady setting a code to let Teen Kat know that he misses her. In 2023 at the pub, Kat asks Nick if he remembers their old friend Alice. He says no, as there were many women from his past. The karaoke announces Kat Landry up as the next performer. Unbeknownst to her, Nick signed her up. She takes the stage and sings You Learn by Alanis Morissette. Nick shares with Elliot that he's engaged and is taking a page out of Elliot's book. Elliot reminds him that his marriage fell apart. Nick realizes that after so many years, Elliot is still in love with Kat and encourages him to make a move. Kat and Elliot arrive at home. Kat knows Elliot wants to kiss her goodnight. She demands a kiss from him, but he refuses, as he said he would do it when the time is perfect. The next morning, as Kat brushes Alice's hair, she reveals that Nick is engaged. Alice cries and tells her mother that she broke up with teen Nick last night. Kat comforts Alice and reminds her that technically it was a long time ago. Kat tells Alice she has something that she has to do. Alice wants to know what her mother's up to, but she doesn't reveal it. In 2000, Kat has returned to the Landrys. She witnessed her parents chatting with tension. Dell is cutting firewood even though Colton told her he would do it. He heads out and Dell is not surprised. Colton doesn't notice that Kat climbs into the bed of his truck. In 2023, Dell is cutting firewood. Byron asks if she ever stops working. She says the day she stops working will be the day she dies. Byron tries to help her, but he gets a splinter. As she nurses his injury, things turn awkward when he tells her he wants to kiss her. In 2000, Colton's truck is speeding while Kat holds on in the back. He arrives at the same motel that Kat and Elliot visited in 2023. As Kat listens in, Colton meets with a private investigator named Morgan. He tells Colton he has no leads. Colton says if Jacob drowned, they would have found his body. Morgan says he wishes he could help him further, but there's nothing more he can do. At the cafe, Alice meets with Spencer and shares her heartbreak about Nick. As she gets up for water, she runs into adult Nick. She congratulates him on his engagement and pretends not to be crushed. In 2000, Kat watches as Colton cries in the boat as he comes to terms with Morgan's dossier. He's stored it away in the boat's cabin. Dell sees him and tells him that dinner's almost ready. She gives him her coat and walks away. Colton calls out to her and tells her he loves her very much. In 2023, Kat races back home. She sees Elliot and tells him what she witnessed. Colton never cheated. It was a private investigator he hired with all that money. There was no other woman and he never gave up looking for Jacob or stopped loving Dell. Kat stares into Elliot's eyes and they share a kiss. She tells him she doesn't care about perfect. Elliot tells her the moment still felt perfect to him. Kat heads for the boat and straight into the cabin for the dossier. She shows Dell and tells her that Colton was ashamed to tell her that he hired a private investigator and that his intentions were good. Dell isn't moved and insists that she doesn't need to see any more of it. Kat explains that Colton didn't have an affair and that the money was used for a private investigator. Dell tells Kat that there was another woman who showed up at the funeral crying. On Elliot's porch, adult Nick says his goodbye to Elliot. He confesses that he lied to Kat. He does remember Alice, but he thought it would be creepy to mention it since she looks so much like Kat's daughter. He tells Elliot Alice was his first love and he misses her. Alice overhears them and smiles. Back at home, Byron tells Kat he's leaving as it is obvious there's no room for him at the Landry house. He can tell that Dell isn't over her late husband. He leaves in hopes to create room for healing to happen. As he heads out, he tells Kat to be good to Dell. Okay, and now is a part of our episode where we give this episode our rating. And just like every other episode, we love The Way Home over here. So, Nini, what did you give episode 8 out of 10?
I mean, 10 out of 10, except for the cringy parts. I give it a 9, but they executed it at a 10.
Yes, I'm giving this a 10 because so much unfolded for me
so much
in this episode.
Too much. So much. Like, blow your mind, blow your hair back. Let's dive into it. As you know, instead of our What's Love Got to Do with It, I don't go chasing waterfalls. I go oi with the poodles already and jayo kiting happily ever after segments that we usually break script with our regular Hallmark movies. Our breakdown starts with Home Sweet Home, which is the glimmers and what we love, breaking down the romantic and family relationships. Usually we start with introducing the main characters here for The Way Home, but there weren't any. So let's talk about glimmers and what we love.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm just going to start with the Alanis Morissette.
Oh my gosh, that was mine.
Okay, Kat has a really good voice. And you know what? I should have, if I wasn't out with a migraine, I really did want to look up, I can't remember the actress's name of Kat. It's off, I forget. But does she sing in real life? Like, she had a really good voice.
She actually
kind of sounded like she didn't have the raspiness necessarily of Alanis Morissette, but she definitely sounded like her. Like I'm just gonna look this up now. Like her voice is so good.
Isn't it amazing? I know Sadie does singing, but I was so surprised at Kat because in her other roles in
She
television
hasn't sung?
series, I don't think so. I could be completely off here. Um, but yes, that was the fact that you're singing an Alanis Morissette song and it's not just ironic that you're singing You Learn, like, especially in this episode,
I
was
know.
so meaningful. And then I was stunned. I thought, especially because they're in a bar and the topic and they're drunk, like, I was expecting it to not be good.
It was good. Okay, side note, her
Yeah.
name's Chyler Leigh. It
Yes.
says she's known as an American actress, singer, and model. So there we go. So she is a singer.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we didn't know that, but amazing, Kyler. Congratulations. What an incredible rendition. They just need to put out the Way Home album of all these covers. Um, that for sure was the hugest glimmer for me. I mean, what a big, first of all, I had glimmers when it was like previously on the way home. Remembering that we're starting this episode with the tension of the last episode of I've been waiting a long time to kiss you, and it's
Hmm.
going to be perfect. That was instant glimmers for me.
Hmm.
But when it opens with adult Cat who's still wet from getting out of the pond, and adult Cat is walking into her house in the 1990s, right? This is her first time going in the house.
Hmm.
And she's smelling her dad's coat
I
and
know.
putting it on and walking through the house. And then that flashback of Landry's never give up, right, Dad?
I
The
know.
fact that Alanis Morissette for me shows up in both the You Learn song and in that first flashback that we end up getting to see in real life that Alice lives out. But the
Mm.
flashback of when you have Kat and Alice, when adult Kat is walking through the house
Hmm.
and she's saying, "Nothing beats Alanis when you're hurting," makes me wish I could funnel my trauma into a top hit. I'm like, same girl, same. Um, and Alice says, "I don't know why you couldn't. I smell a gold record." I'm like, oh yes, you should always make money on your trauma, guys. That's my that's my glimmer and advice for
That's
today.
funny.
Do your best to make money on your trauma. Anyway, those were my biggest glimmers.
Mm.
But
Um, I what I also loved glimmers and I loved about this episode is like despite, and we're gonna get into the interesting situation that unfolds with Nick and Alice, but despite
mm-hmm.
it being weird, you know what I loved is that Kat was really there for Alice and like
Yes,
understood that despite the fact that it was so weird because not only is there an age gap, but there's like a time traveling situation that's happening,
totally.
she still understood that her daughter was facing heartbreak. Um,
Yes.
in like in real time, even though Nick was older and just mourning this loss of like that was your first relationship, your first kiss. And I just loved how Kat handled it. And even when
Mm-hmm.
Kat is asking Nick about Alice, like it's almost like it's a friend. This is future Kat,
Yes,
adult Kat asking,
exactly.
"Do you remember your relationship with Alice? I don't know if you realize like I named my daughter Alice." Like you can tell she's kind of probing. It
Totally.
you just see this cute mother-daughter friendship form. Like you kind of see the friendship that Kat and Alice has have in the 90s starting to emerge in present day. I
Mm-hmm.
really liked that development, despite again the weird situation that we'll get into.
Exactly. OMG. I
Okay,
think
I
our notes
haven't.
are like exactly the same
Yeah,
because
I have one other glimmer.
oh
Um,
yeah.
thing that I loved about this episode is Elliot and Kat finally have that kiss.
What?
They finally kissed. It was amazing. It was very sweet. And I loved that when she's telling him, like, oh, I know you wanted to wait for it to be perfect or whatever, but she didn't want to wait. And he was like, this was perfect. And it was very sweet. It was a very sweet moment.
Yeah. Well, my highlight of that was that then she says, "I gotta go," and it's Elle's turn to yell, "What?"
Oh, yeah, that was really funny.
That
The
was
way he
my
yelled
favorite
it.
part.
Yeah, that was
I
funny.
loved it so much. I just love so much how the relationships are developing even more. And I
Mhm.
just want to re-emphasize like Kat being there for Alice, like in both, like as an adult Kat,
Mhm.
her still being like that friendship, and her telling Alice that it was brave that she broke
Yes.
up with him, but that she was still in emotions like, well, this is new for you, you know, like, and
Yeah.
validating her. I just could not get over how amazing that was. And the fact that also at the same time, Kat is also reaching out to her mother of wanting that closure of like, yeah, no,
Mm,
I don't want their, memories of dad to be tainted by misunderstanding.
you're
Like
right.
she's trying to
Mhm.
clear up, like, did dad have another woman, which we will talk about. Let's move on then. Yeah, are we ready?
Yep.
Our second segment of Breaking Script with The Way Home is Surprising Detours, where we talk about surprises, unhealthy behaviors, or coping mechanisms. I mean, this opens with Kat seeing her parents arguing in the 90s.
Mhm.
Um, which I did actually have an additional glimmer. I love that Kat got to see Colton saying to Dell during this time when there's still tension, like, I love you,
Love you.
Delilah.
I that part was so moving, and it was
Yeah,
such a beautiful, and the way he said that was so much emotion.
I
I
know.
love Colton.
No. I anyway, yeah, the fact that she got to witness an argument because it wasn't something she got to witness as a teenager, I just felt like was really meaningful.
Mm,
It gave more meaning. I think that's always like, as a kid, you don't understand. There's a lot of things that you don't understand until you get older and your
so
parents
true.
tell you the story in hindsight. And you're like, oh, that makes so much more sense.
Mm.
Um, but also that when Kat jumped in the pond and got out, and Alice said to her, I thought you said you were done with the pond. And Kat was like so emotional, was like, I can't right now.
Mhm.
Because she had just saw her parents fighting, like that Alice gave her that space. I thought it was surprising. So this is
Mhm.
for me, it's like connecting the glimmers and the surprising, like, okay, that's a surprising detour. That I
Mhm.
didn't realize Alice didn't realize her mom was still jumping in the pond,
Oh, yeah.
right? And then Elle telling Kat, like, you broke and entered. And Kat's like, I didn't break, I just entered. Like, it's her house. What a weird thought, right?
I
Because
know.
Elle's explaining to her, like, you are not you. You
I
are a
know.
stranger in the
To your
90s.
parents. Yeah.
What an interesting thought. But anyways, what else you got here?
Okay,
I have
well,
so much.
I already touched on it, but we finally meet Nick, which I loved that we they really set us up in episode 7 that we're not going to meet Nick, and then for him just to
Hmm.
show up at the it was such a perfect
Yes.
timing because the audience does not expect him to be at the door when she goes to the
Exactly.
door. Loved that. Also he looked so much like the younger Nick. They did a great job with casting because immediately you
True.
know who it is. Um, and I was so surprised that he, quote unquote, did not remember Alice. And he really
Right.
okay, it turns out, guys, he does remember Alice, but he plays it
Hmm.
off that he doesn't. And he just kind of fluffs it off as it was no big deal. Um, Okay, another thing that surprised me in a great way, the
Hmm.
motel. Colton is
Ugh,
not having an affair. He used all the money on a
what?
PI. That was actually a huge sigh of relief because I loved
Totally.
Colton up until the point where I thought he was having an affair on Dell. And so even when he's yelling, I love you, Delilah, it felt almost like an omission of guilt in some
Hmm.
ways of like I hate what I'm doing, but it's because I love you know what
Mm,
I mean? Like it kind of felt
totally.
guilty and then you realize it's that frustration is misdirected it and he is hiring a PI. Anyways, brilliant. Such a red
Yeah.
herring.
So, oh my gosh, so good. And even more surprising that even when we feel like we get to this place of closure and that Colton didn't have another woman, we find out that Dell's like, this is not enough for me. Like, there was another woman. She showed up at the
Mm-hmm.
funeral. Like, what? Like, there's always going to be something, guys. Have you
I
learned with
know.
this show yet? Like, there's always something. Um, Anyway, so I think I agree with the same. Like, I loved so much how they set up the surprise of Nick showing up.
Yeah.
Um, but even more so, the fact that we end with Alice overhearing Nick's conversation with Elle, and we do not realize the entire time Elle realizes that Alice is there and is listening and has a smile on her face, that Nick, that was he confesses that that's his first love. And not only that, but that first loves are so meaningful. Like, oh,
Mhm.
MG. This was borderline like surprise dead ends for me of like what we didn't like, because it's also cringy, but also I love when you brought up like how well Nick played it off,
Mhm.
that he didn't remember Alice.
Yeah.
Was that like also super mature of him of like, because then he's processing in that conversation with Elle that Alice overhears, like, I felt like that would kind of be inappropriate to bring up.
So I
That her
think that
daughter
was
Alice reminds me of my first love Alice. Like,
yeah, that's what I couldn't, I guess I couldn't figure out why, and that was a little bit of maybe a dead end or just a misunderstanding for me is like why
yeah,
he why he felt that would be awkward to be like, "Oh, you named her Alice." She kind of like why pretend you don't even remember her at all? Which I think was just a writer's choice. I don't think it has anything to do with the storyline. I just thought that was
I
really
agree.
interesting, and it made the resolve of him actually remembering Alice much better. So I get it.
Totally.
I was very confused because I'm like, I can remember every crush that I've had in my life. How do you not remember your first? And also, this is just a side note, and I'm totally gonna botch this, but like I once heard, now this isn't apply to everybody, but I once heard this advice, and I can't remember what reputable source I heard it from. Probably a magazine. No, I'm joking. But it was they talked about how you actually everyone their first love, you always that's kind of your benchmark for love, but your first love tends to be the most unhealthy, and that's kind of where
Mm,
your body gets stuck, right? And so you are always chasing that feeling of your first love, and it tends to be very strong and very emotional and very physical, right? And so when you actually meet someone and have a healthy connection with them, you still have that benchmark that you're trying to attain those feelings. And they're saying you actually your first love, that's not the ideal love that you should have, and yet everyone chases that feeling. Isn't that interesting? Like when you think about it,
fascinating.
when you're young, you don't have the ability to process your emotions, and that's why it tends to be
Yeah.
so charged, especially physically charged,
Hmm.
um and that kind of gets hardwired into your body. And they're saying it's
Yeah.
actually not, you have to like reprogram yourself, but because you see someone, I don't know, I recently had a conversation with someone and they're like, I never liked someone the way that I liked that person. And really it's like, well,
Mm,
you shouldn't like them that way because that wasn't healthy. Anyway, so
so good.
I'm glad maybe Nick has done that programming, that deprogramming. That's why he doesn't remember. Nick, you're
That's
so
hilarious.
mature.
God, you've done your deprogramming work. Good for you. It's hilarious. I love it. Love this so much. Well, I mean, let's just get into it. The dead ends and what we didn't like, because I mean, this kind of overlaps for me. But when Alice breaks up with Nick and gives her fishhook bracelet back, heart wrenching. But it so needs to happen.
Yeah.
But what I don't like is that Elle and Kat are listening in as Alice is breaking up with Nick. Like,
I
they literally
know.
have their backs to them in the cafe,
I know.
and Elle and Kat are listening,
So
and
high
Kat
school.
gets a text. Oh my gosh, I just said a text. Kat gets a page from Brady. And this was our introduction to pager code in this show. I didn't
Oh
like how
yeah.
this was introduced. You're too young. You're too young for pager code, right?
I didn't have my mom had a pager. I always wanted a
Oh
pager, but
gosh. Oh my gosh. My cousin got me my first one because I obviously wasn't allowed to have it. But then I had all kinds of like the mini ones. Do you remember the really tiny
with the
pagers that were like,
screens that had a
so I
flip up
also had
screen?
a Motorola two-way text. But I had
Oh.
like I also had it got really trendy like when the Nokia candy bar tiny phones were popular, thanks to
Mhm.
Charlie's Angels. Right before then, they also had these tiny pagers that were like the size of half of a credit card.
Oh, whoa.
Oh, that you don't, yeah, you're too young. I had multiple variations of those that were like supposedly super cool and trendy. But what's really funny is that it's almost like every group of friends are like East Coast pager code and West Coast pager code was different.
Oh, interesting.
And to this day, even my daughter knows, and I have a friend of mine that we text we text each other um screenshots of when our we see the clock and it's 1:43.
What does that
Do you know
mean?
this? 1:43 means I love you.
Aw, no.
And 6:37 means always and forever. And I'll never forget because West Coast and East Coast are different. I'll never forget teaching some of my East Coast friends that because I,
That's
I grew
so
up on the
funny.
West Coast, but I had friends on the East Coast that are like
Right.
family friends. This one kid, he he didn't realize that like those numbers stand for something because it's four because there's four letters in love, three because there's three letters in you, same thing with always and forever. That he would put at the end of his letters to his girlfriend because we would write in pager code in letters sometimes too because we didn't text each other, we handed each other notes, and so in our notes sometimes we would write in pager code.
That is
And so
hilarious.
this kid would write in his note to his girlfriend just a bunch of numbers at the end to say I love you. Anyways,
Aw.
that is why I was like, this is not an appropriate way to introduce my nostalgic feels of pager code during a breakup that your friend is listening on. What best friend listens in on a breakup? I just I just can't. I'm sorry. Anyway, also that Nick is a camp counselor to the rich and famous, which translates to sailing on super yachts for a living. I was confused. So what does he do for a living?
Have you ever seen the show Below Deck?
No.
He's a yachty. Which, oh, that might be derogatory. Maybe they don't like to be called that. Apologies to anybody who works on a yacht. Um, they're like a he. It sounds like he works as like maybe like a bosun on or like that's what I would
Oh,
imagine or a deckhand. It's a
interesting.
very cool job.
Interesting. I feel like I need to look into this now. Okay. Well,
And to be
um,
honest, part of
yeah.
the reason why I think they are doing that is because Below Deck, which is a reality show, is a really big kind of thing as of the last few
Oh,
years.
gotcha.
It's kind of turned into like the Real Housewives of yachting. Um, so it kind of was a nod to
Oh, I'm not
cultural
in the
like
know, people.
significance
Yeah.
right now. So
Mm,
I thought that was interesting.
that is very interesting. Well, I feel like all my things revolve, not all of them, but most of them revolve around Nick
Mm.
because then I didn't like how he told Elle he got engaged while Kat is still singing. And dude, you're the one that signed her up. You couldn't wait for Kat to sit down so you could tell them both at the same time. Like,
That is true. Maybe he felt it would be
what?
too painful. Well, I guess Elliot is divorced too. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes
So,
sense.
because he said, and then he follows that up by saying he took a page out of Elle's book due
Mm-hmm.
to like, how committed Elle is, but he's not making a commentary to the woman that Elle was married to. It's to Kat,
Yeah.
who just, ouch. It just was all a little cringy
Yeah.
to me, but necessary, executed so well, brilliant writing. I'm so happy with it. But yeah, I mean, seeing Heartbroken Alice, like while Kat is singing, still, you learn, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing Heartbroken Alice juxtaposed to Dell taking off her ring for the first time after a conversation with Byron, which we didn't talk about the fact that yet that Byron was sleeping on Dell's couch to recover.
Yeah.
And
That
in this,
mm,
right? What,
that was a
go
dead
for it. Go
end.
ahead.
That was a dead end for me. I think I just don't understand Byron. place in
Mm-hmm.
which makes me actually suspicious. So Byron, I have written down here that this Byron storyline falls in dead end slash predictions curiosity. That's what I'm gonna say. Is like,
Totally.
who is Byron? Also,
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't need to sleep on your couch. Um,
Yeah.
what is he's a mystery, and like I just don't understand. Maybe
Right.
I just don't understand the whole Byron and Nick there or the you know what I'm trying to say.
A
Um,
100%. A hundred
but
percent. I mean,
like
that's yeah.
I don't know if he was just placed there to really highlight, and that could be it. He could just be a character that's been placed in the story to highlight the fact that as hard and as strong as Dell is, that she's still, and as much as she wants to show that she's living in the future, that she's still really
Mm-hmm.
stuck in the past.
Totally. I that was my biggest part of Dead Ends, and what I didn't like is that whole, especially the conversation between Byron and Tell, telling her he'd like to kiss her, and then they bonk heads, and then it's just cringy,
Mm-hmm.
and then she says it just comes out that she's sitting in Colton's chair, and then he mansplains grief to her, and she's like, "Thank you for
For
mansplaining grief to
mansplaining
me." Like,
grief, yeah.
oh my god,
Yeah.
why? Like, and I just think, um, it's so geniusly written. I feel like this is one of those scripts that I just love so much because I feel like you're playing chess on just so many different levels.
So true.
Because you're juxtaposing all three generations of romantic relationships. And
Yeah.
this is in Dead Ends because of how cringy they are. That's why this is in Dead Ends. But I feel like it needs to be addressed
Mm.
that you have Byron and Dell. And I think he is necessary to show a woman's journey with grief and how moving on after such an intense grief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but just the fact that their awkward kiss moment immediately cuts to Alice, and we're still processing the whole Alice and Nick thing.
Right.
But she's meeting with Spencer and his girlfriend, and that whole Alice Spencer thing, like, you're putting so many cringy, awkward things all together that I can't possibly process it all at the same time.
No, I know.
They're sitting at the cafe, and she runs into adult Nick again at the cafe and congratulates him on his engagement that, clearly he didn't tell her. She heard from her mom.
Yeah,
Such an
that was
awkward
awkward.
encounter. But then it's followed up by Spencer's girlfriend saying, "Who is that hot older guy?"
I
How many
know.
cringy moments can we put into one scene?
I
Like,
know.
I hate it, but it's brilliant writing, is what I'm
I
saying.
know.
And then it's literally the cherry on top is followed by the scene of Dell's telling Byron things for mansplaining grief for me. I mean, like, I hate it so much because you wrote it so well. I'm congratulating you. That's all I got for Dead Ends. Should
Yeah,
we
me
move on to
too.
the way we see it?
Mm-hmm.
This is a unique segment that we have for the way home, because instead of happily ever after like we have for Hallmark movies, this is theories because there's so many, and I cannot wait till we're doing this. This is different for us because we've already seen all 10 episodes,
Yeah.
but we're going back to try to watch them one by one as if we haven't. But it's hard.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to do this for season 2, which
Okay,
of course you guys comes out January 21st.
so
What
excited for
theories
that.
do you have here? Go ahead.
So something that I've been thinking about more since watching this the second time through
Mm-hmm.
is, are the people, so is Kat and Alice who go to the past
Mm-hmm.
unrecognizable to the people in the future? Meaning,
Yes.
how do they not, like, how does Nick not clock
Right.
Alice as his old girlfriend? He says she resembles or reminds him.
Right.
Same with, how did Kat not recognize that Alice
Mm-hmm.
was her best friend and her daughter? Like, is there something that changes their
Mm-hmm.
appearance or just the way you perceive somebody in the past? Do you know what I'm trying to say here?
A total 100%. I think we might have mentioned it on other
We have, but I think this is
episodes. Like, how
really,
does this time travel work? And at what point, like, do people wake up? Are their memories erased? Like, is it only happen to certain people? Which is why, in the way we see it, I have different villains.
Yeah.
And so it like alternates between different people because it seems like, are there people that are awake all the time? Like, okay, so if you've seen the show, ABC show of Once Upon a Time,
Yes.
where there's certain characters that are awake and remember more memories, and then we find out that Rumpelstiltskin has been awake possibly the whole time, or like he has more
Right?
control of it somehow.
Yeah.
That's what this reminds me of, which I think is why I'm like, who's the Rumpelstiltskin here? And so
Okay, well,
sometimes I think it's Byron.
I was just gonna say, I think Byron is bad. That's my gut feeling. I think Byron is bad. And I think
Yeah.
that there is something that changes your appearance when you go to the past so that people don't
Mm,
fully recognize you. You feel familiar
mhm.
and more will be revealed later.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree.
Hey, those are
That's
my
my biggest
predictions. That's
theory.
all I have. Yeah, that's all I
That's
have.
my biggest theory is that anyone I have question marks of, like sometimes Spencer becomes a villain, sometimes Byron becomes a villain, sometimes Elle
Mm,
becomes a villain. For me, sometimes I'm like, Dell,
mm.
is she the witch? How much? And who is like, maybe there's multiple villains, but there's one that's strongest of them all.
And is the witch bad or is the witch good?
Right, exactly. Oh
So
my gosh,
many, so
there's
many
so many
possibilities.
things. So many things. Cannot wait. I mean, all my kids know January 21st is the premiere of The Way Home season 2. We cannot wait. I don't know what our schedule is going to look like actually. We need to talk about that of how we're putting out episodes. We'll let you know next week hopefully of how we're going to get those out. But we're so excited for it. We hope you are too. Do we have any final thoughts or favorite quotes here?
I don't have anything noted, but I
I
mean,
have one,
oh, go ahead.
which this isn't like usually favorite quotes. I'm trying to find something like inspirational or funny, but
Mm-hmm.
I just have to say, Dell saying, "The day I slow down is the day I die." Have I mentioned this before? I can't remember. But Lala, do you know this? That's like my dad's saying is I grew up with my dad always telling me the day you retire and have nothing to do is the day you die.
Oh dear. I am not surprised.
Right. Oh my gosh, we have to on another episode talk about uh my dad's akong's recipe for financial freedom another day. He just has
The
the most
best.
hilarious best advice. So when she said that, I literally we're gonna start a thing, you guys. I bursted out laughing. You know how there's LOL? I'm gonna start a thing as BOL. I have to give
First
credit
out.
to my childhood friend for
It's
that.
funny.
We would text each other BOL.
That's funny.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, Dell and my dad should be best friends. Because I had to deprogram from that.
Hmm.
And that is something there's still, even though I've done so much work, that was the program that was running for me from October to December that I didn't realize had come back and snuck back in.
Mm.
And I was having so much trouble, more trouble than I've had in recent years, slowing down. You guys, it's so important
So
to
true.
slow
Yeah.
down. It's okay. It actually helps you to speed up when you need to, and it's appropriate. So, anyway, that's all. Join us, be back after January 21st for The Way Home season 2, but we have 2 more episodes to go of season 1.
Thanks for breaking script with us. Please share your glimmers by leaving a review for our show in Apple Podcasts and share our show on your social media and tag the Breaking Script podcast. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you get an alert and never miss an episode. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.